Welcome back, everyone. Last year, state lawmakers across our great nation have been hard at work. And while, of course, some have been doing more than others, there are 22 states that have hiked the minimum wage, lifting the pay floor for roughly 10 million workers. But these higher wages are coming at a time when workers are struggling with increased costs due to historic inflation levels. Nevertheless, the small business and franchises that now have to pay these employees the increased hourly rate may struggle to stay open. So they survived a pandemic, but now the government's going to kill them. Fun times. Now, while time will tell, one question that I have is whether or not these state and city-passed legislative measures are going to further decimate our economy. So joining us to talk about this issue right now is Brandon Arnold. He is the Executive Vice President of the National Taxpayers Union. Brandon, welcome back. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thanks for having me.
I want to stick on this topic of minimum wage because we now have 3 states, California, New York, and Washington. They're raising their minimum wage to $16. Now, I looked up some statistics, and $16 is more than rookie year paramedics and EMTs make in 5 different states. So they want someone who is dropping potatoes in peanut oil to make more than someone who could literally save your life. I know this is an ongoing debate between the left and the right, between Republicans and Democrats, but this seems like a very dangerous precedent to set for our economy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the truth of the matter is markets do a much better job of setting wages than politicians do. Politicians, many of whom are beholden to labor unions, are just picking arbitrary numbers without looking at how they impact businesses. Of course, we want to help workers. Of course, we want everybody to make a living wage. But people are generally better off making $8 or $9 or $10 an hour than they are if their business shuts down, the business that they work for shuts down, or if they have to downsize employees and they lose their jobs. So when politicians come up with these arbitrary numbers, they end up heaping these huge costs on small businesses that can oftentimes be so weighty that they put these businesses under or force drastic measures like cutting costs elsewhere. Oftentimes that means laying off their employees. They're hurting the very workers that they are trying or saying they're trying to help.
There's a long history proving that is the case. Brandon, I want to look at the different elements of the fiscal policy right now. Right? We've got these minimum wage jumps coming in. We've got still large federal spending, and that's still driving inflation. And, of course, that's driven up interest rates. Now the debt on the interest service on the debt is putting enormous pressure on the budget. Republicans got a year. They had an opportunity to put their imprint on government. It still looks the same as the year before they got there. What do they need to do in the next few months to show voters that they made a difference, that they actually did what they said they were going to do when they were sent to Washington?
Yeah, let's try to be as optimistic as we can here, John. I know it's tough. You look at all this red ink and you look at all this past mismanagement of the federal budget, and it's easy to get depressed here. But I really think they need to focus on 2 things. The first thing is to focus on the national debt, the deficits that we've run up over the past few years. We've had deficit problems going back for decades, but we went into turbo mode during the pandemic. We need to rein in spending because obviously we've seen that's had a very negative effect on inflation, which has hurt Americans of all stripes. The other thing I think we need to do is focus on producing more domestically. Now, there's 2 ways to reduce inflation. To reduce prices, you either reduce demand, which is what's happened through the Fed's actions, or you increase supply. You can increase supply by encouraging more manufacturing. Essentially, if we're making more stuff here, then prices will more naturally fall, and they'll do so at less of a cost, because when you reduce demand, that's effectively another word for saying making people poorer. So let's pass tax policies in a fiscally responsible manner that actually incentivize companies to make investments in domestic businesses, produce more, manufacture more, and that will have a positive impact, certainly on prices, but also on the job market, which is increasingly looking a little bit shaky.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Brandon, for an administration that is running for re-election, I have to think that they would want to employ some of these things that would help drive the economy sooner. And yet they claim to be doing things that are going to inject the economy later. You're not going to see it for a while, because Karine Jean-Pierre, White House press secretary, said that you just have to wait a little longer to see the benefits of Bidenomics. I know that this is going to be driving the election, even though the White House doesn't want to be driving the economy, but they can't hide from it.
No, that's right. You look at the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, arguably the worst named piece of legislation in our nation's history. but it doesn't project, even under the administration's own numbers, it doesn't project to reduce inflation anytime in the near future. You're looking at making long-term investments that may or may not work. I'm a little skeptical, if we're being honest here, that may reduce prices of energy down the road by making enormous trillion-dollar investments in green energy and electric vehicles and so forth. But the immediate impact is more spending, more deficit finance spending. And that's all this administration knows how to do. I think it's that old case when if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. All they know how to do is spend, spend, spend. And that is what has helped fuel inflation. It's not the only cause, but it's certainly helped to fuel inflation. And now we really need to find ways to turn that ship around, start moving in the opposite direction, where we're being a little bit more fiscally responsible. We're starting to move in the direction of balanced budgets. It won't happen immediately, but we at least need a directional change right now. And this administration is so resistant to it, even though, as you say, it's probably coming at a pretty hefty political cost.
Yeah, that's so true. I want to stay on that green energy economy one more. After all the trillions of investment that was just made in clean energy, we had the largest year ever in consumption of gasoline in the United States. Didn't seem like they checked that box very well for the Democrats. And then the EPA Inspector General came out Friday and said, hey, the $5 billion you gave to local school districts to convert their buses to electric, you have one problem. You didn't work with the utilities, so the buses have no electricity. Are Americans beginning to realize that the green energy thing hasn't really turned out to be a clean energy success at all?
Yeah, I mean, what the administration is doing here, they're bungling the whole thing because they're trying to not only foster this green economy, but they're also beholden to labor unions. So they're trying to juggle all of these different priorities. And that's why you see, for instance, this big initiative, billions of dollars sunk into building more charging stations, and yet we haven't built a single one yet. That's why you see this huge tax credit that is supposed to deploy all these additional electric vehicles. But guess what? There's only 13 vehicles now that are even eligible for it. Many vehicles lost eligibility because, again, they're trying to be beholden not just to the environmental community, but also to the special interests in the labor community right now. So you can't serve all of these purposes simultaneously. What you have instead are billions and billions of dollars going out the door and not even helping their stated causes, while all they do is fuel greater inflation, greater deficits, and so forth. It's an absolute mess.
Yeah, that it is.
I mean, it's not just cart before horse green energy policy. It's sheer lunacy. I swear if the Biden administration thought they could pass a law to run all vehicles on unicorn poop, they would totally do it. But Brandon, we learn so much from you every time we have you on. We love having you here, and we're going to have you back on again very soon. Thank you so much for being here. And you don't want to go anywhere, because when we come back, award-winning novelist and Oscar-nominated screenwriter Roger L. Simon is going to be here to talk about his new book, American Refugees.